focusing on proportional linear functions, but we're going to be looking at how we put them on the coordinate grid and graph each of these and then find their slope. So when you are asked to write an equation to represent a proportional relationship from 2 points, we have to follow these steps. So you want to graph each point on the graph that's given to you. And if there isn't a graph given to you, just sketch it on some graph paper and go ahead and try to figure it out from there. You'll calculate the slope then by using the slope formula. So I've inserted it from the beginning of our notes here. Remember, slope is the change in y over the change in x. You can think of it as the vertical change over the horizontal change, or most commonly, and how I'm going to refer to it here, we're going to talk about rise over run. Remember, when the sun rises, it comes up in the sky, so that's our vertical. And then when we run, we have to run on flat ground, so that's our horizontal change. So our practice problem says, for each pair of points below, find the equation of the line that passes through them. We have a line that's passing through the point 1, 4 and negative 1, 4. So the first step was just to graph those, plot those points. So the point 1, 4, you go 1 to the right, so you're on 1 for your positive x here, and then up to positive 4 on the y, so this is our first point that we want. And then negative 4, we go to negative 1 on the x-axis and go 4 down. That makes that point right here. Now, if you have a ruler or a piece of paper that you can put up along the side of your paper to make sure you're drawing a straight line, that's going to be ideal here. You want to take your line and it wants to come right through both of those points. So let's see if I can fix that. When you do this, you want to go, oh, mine doesn't seem to be working. So we're just going to do my best job on this line. Hopefully yours is going to look a little bit more neat than mine. But you want it to look like a straight line right through those points. Mine doesn't look too great. But what we want to do now is look at those 2 points that they gave us. We're going to find the slope. So start at the point that's on the furthest left here. So this is the furthest left point. We're going to count how many boxes it takes to rise to the next point. So from this point here, we're at negative 4. We have to get all the way up to positive 4. So our rise here is going to be 8 boxes up. We just have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 whole boxes to get to our next one. So the rise here is up 8. So rise equals 8. And then we want to find our run. And remember, the run is just going to be the horizontal movement. So from this point to this point, horizontally, we have to go 1, 2 boxes. So 2 to the right. So that means our run is 2. So our rise over run is 8 over 2, and that simplifies to 4. So that's going to mean that the slope here is equal to 4. So 4 equals m, which equals the slope. And so to write it in our form y equals mx, we can say y equals 4x. That means that this is the equation for the line that passes through the 2 points that were given to us here. And this next one, if you want to try it on your own, pause the video and do that first. If not, just listen along. So you want to first plot your points. We have 8, 4. So we go, start at your origin, go to positive 8 on the x-axis, and up 4 on the y. That's our first point. And then we have 10, 5. So go to start at your origin, positive 10 on your x, which is right here at the edge, and then up 5 on the y. So you have these 2 points here. So your graph is going to, again, just be a straight line, and I'm going to do my best to draw that here. Be a little bit more patient this time, so it'll look something like this. And that's your line of the graph that we're trying to figure out the equation for. And we're going to use the slope method again. So we're going to do rise over run. So from the leftmost point to get to the next one, we have to go up 1. So the rise here is 1. Our run is how far we have to move horizontally. We have to go over 1, 2 boxes to the right. So that's right 2. So our run is 2. Now, this is just 1 over 2. You could simplify it to 0.5 if you want, but I'm just going to keep it in a fraction there. So that means our slope, or our m value, is equal to 1/2 here. And then to fill in our y equals mx form, we have y equals 1/2 x. Now remember, we're allowed to use this form y equals mx because this example here is proportional, and we know that because this graph went through the origin at 0, 0. If you go back to that example that was above it, it was the same in this case too. It went right through the origin. That means we're allowed to say that this is proportional, and we can use that form of y equals mx. So just keep that in mind from our last lesson. Now moving on, if you are given a graph, you don't even have to plot the points this time. You just want to find your slope, just like how we talked about, and then write the equation for the line that's graphed there. So you want to first find 2 points on the graph of a line. Now remember when we were graphing those points in the previous examples, those points that we had were right on the corner of these grid lines here. So that's going to be a good point to pick. You want to find something that's on the line and then pick something that is on the corner of a grid line. A bad point to pick would be something that's right in the middle of one of these boxes, because this is about 4.5, 4.5, and then that gets a little fishy if we're dealing with smaller graphs or kind of just more irregular numbers. So it's going to be best to pick those those points that are on the corner. So I'm just going to label this as a bad point to choose, just so you can kind of try to remember to pick one of those nice corner grid line points. So I picked the point 2, 2, and another good point to pick might be right here at 4, 4, because those are definite whole number points that we're able to see very clearly are on this graph. So you want to find your slope first. So figure out how far apart the lines are vertically. That's your rise. So from the left point to the right point, we have to go up 2. So my rise is 2. And then the run, we have to go 2 to the right. So my run here is 2. So that means that we have 2 over 2 is our slope, but 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So in this case, our slope equals 1, which means our equation would be y equals 1x. So that's all you have to do there is find your slope. You have to pick some good points to figure the slope out, but once you know your slope, you can write it in this form. Remember, this is a proportional graph because it does pass through the origin, so we're allowed to use this form y equals mx. So there's 2 graphs below as practice problems for you. You can use this example to help you. If you feel confident, pause the video, do them on your own, and then check your work. All right, now that you've hopefully tried that on your own, we're going to just review. So first thing you want to do is pick 2 good points on the graph. I'm going to pick this one here, which is at 2, 1, and then this other one, which is at 4, 2. And remember, these are good points because they're on the grid line corners. I have to rise 1, and I have to run 2. So my slope is 1 over 2, or 1/2. So that means in the form y equals mx, which I am allowed to use because I went through the origin for this graph, it's y equals 1/2 x as our equation. In our next one, we do have a proportional graph again. It's going through the origin. We're going to pick 2 good points on the corner of grid lines. This point is 1, 2, and this point is 2, 4. To go from this point to this point, we have to go up 2, so the rise is 2, and the run is to the right 1. We're just going over one box. So the rise over run is 2 over 1. 2 over 1 equals 2. So the slope here is 2. That means that we can write this as y equals 2x. Moving on to the next example. If you're given the slope and a point for a line and you have to figure out the equation, there's going to be 2 different ways you can do this. So you can graph the point that's given and then use slope and think about it in that form that we've been saying, rise over run, in order to find the next point that you could graph to make the whole line. Or you could create the equation in the form y equals mx because they give you the slope, and then you can create a table of values by plugging in x values to figure out y, and then plot those points to find your slope. So in this first example, I'm going to use the first method. So if you graph the point that's given, so in this case we have the point -2, -8, that's going to be starting at the origin, 2 to the left, and then down 8. which is right here. And then my slope is 4. So remember, slope is rise over run. If my slope here is 4, that means my rise is 4, and the run is just 1, because 4 divided by 1 is equal to 4. So we can write it in this form. So I'm going to start at the point that was given, and I'm going to go up 4 boxes. And then I'm going to run 1 box to the right. That means my next point is at -1, -4. From that point, I'm going to go up 4 again, and to the right 1. That means my next point is at 0, 0. So this is a proportional relationship. I go up 4 and to the right 1. So I'm at 1, 4. And then I can go up 4 and to the right 1. And I get another point at 2, 8. So then carefully, or with a ruler if you have one, you want to take it and you want to draw the best line that you can through these points that you've now marked using your slope. So this line will have a slope of 4 because every time you have a point on a grid line, you're going up 4 and to the right 1 to get to that next line. So that would mean that the equation for this line is y equals 4x. The slope was 4, and then you have that value, you're multiplying each x value by 4 to get your y. So that's going to be your first method. I personally like this method easiest because you can just kind of follow your slope and go up 4 over 1 each time to make your graph. Now, the other way that you can do it, we can show in this next example. So the slope that's given to you is 1/4. So remember that slope is 1/4, and we can write our y equals mx form to make a rule here. So y is going to equal 1/4 x. So that means that every x value we want to test out, we can plug into this rule and we'll get a y value. So you can actually make a table of values here and then test some of these out. So the point that's given is -4, -1, which is right here. So I'm going to start by graphing that. And then let's try a point with our x being 4. So if my x is 4 and my rule is y equals 1/4 times our x, and I'm using 4 as my x, then y should equal 1. So that means that a point that I've now just found on this graph is going to be 4, 1. So 4, 1. Now let's test another one. We could test the point 8. If I do y equals 1/4 times 8, I would get 2. So when x is 8, y is 2. So the point 8, 2 would be another good point. Now, if you kind of start looking at the slope of this, you're going up 1 and to the right 4. So from any point here, we can go up 1 to the right 4, up 1 to the right 4, up 1 to the right 4. So we kind of go back to that rise over run that we were doing before. Now, if you have to graph some points to the left, we just have to do the opposite. So instead of going up 1, I'm going to go down 1 and then left 4 just to get this point over here. You could also have gotten that by plugging in this -8 for x. If I do that, I have 1/4 times -8, and that's -2. So another point that we could have is -8, -2. And that's where we have that point. So carefully construct that line there. And there's the graph for the equation y equals 1/4 x, which passes through this point and has a slope of 1/4. Thank you for watching.